If you're advising a business or a law firm and now you're advising them to put this on their risk register, we now have to have on our risk register the possibility that we could have all of a sudden 120,000 lawsuits filed against us tomorrow. What are the strategies that you would advise them to think about in preparing for this kind of risk?
We're entering a totally new era of risk in the way that we think about it as lawyers. And our discomfort comes from trying to apply the frameworks that we used in the prior era to this new era. But we're actually doing ourselves a disservice if we don't try to reshape the way that we think about sharing information, for example, to protect our clients from risk. So I think in the long term, their counsel would be for the whole profession to sort of rethink the way that we consider information.
Welcome to 2030 Vision, AI and the Future of Law, your go-to podcast focused on exploring the transformative impact of artificial intelligence on the legal industry. We're your hosts, Bridget McCormack and Jen Leonard, and together we'll navigate the rapidly evolving landscape of artificial intelligence, uncovering the opportunities, addressing the risks, and imagining the future.
In each episode, we bring you insightful discussions about cutting-edge technologies, the latest trends, actionable strategies, case studies, and novel insights that help your organization imagine its own future.
Whether you're a legal professional, a tech enthusiast, or simply curious about the future of law, this podcast is your gateway to understanding the profound changes AI will bring to the profession. Join us as we scale education and empower the legal community to thrive in an era of unprecedented innovation.
Welcome to 2030 Vision, AI and the Future of Law. Hi, everyone, and welcome back to 2030 Vision, AI and the Future of Law. I'm your co-host, Jen Leonard, founder of Creative Lawyers, and I'm here with the wonderful Bridget McCormack, president and CEO of the American Arbitration Association. We are here, as we are every episode, to talk about the developments in the landscape of generative AI and to think about what those developments mean for the legal profession. As we do on every episode, we will each share what we call our AI ahas, the things that we have used AI for in our personal or professional lives since our last recording that we have found to be particularly delightful or magical. We'll then share a definition that people might not be familiar with that relates to AI that people might start hearing in their work and in their lives. And then we'll dive into a main topic and go a little bit deeper onto something that we think is particularly interesting. And this week, we are going to talk about the question of what happens when legal action and engagement with the legal system costs next to nothing. And in particular, we are going to focus today on what that means in the regulatory and administrative law landscape. But before we dive into that, Bridget, I'm so excited to see you. And where are you today?
I'm excited to see you as well, and I hope if you're watching this podcast instead of listening to it, and it looks like I'm in a hostage video, I'm really not. I am in Las Vegas. There are two big conferences happening here that are relevant to my work. The eCourts conference, which is the main court technology conference, always a good one, and the construction super conference. Construction lawyers are a pretty innovative bunch. They have to figure out how to resolve disputes quickly to keep their projects moving. So we have a lot of interaction with the construction industry. So I'm straddling both. And apparently in Las Vegas, in hotel rooms, you're only allowed to have one light. So I've just moved my computer basically to the bar area where I'm trying to make it look like trying to make sure you can actually see me when we have this conversation, Jen. So great to see you.
Great to see you. I'm glad to know you're safe.
Yeah. I'll blink 3 times if things go south.
Yeah. Give us a signal. Well, thank you for joining us so early in Vegas. I know how busy you are, and maybe you can kick us off by sharing your AI aha for the week.
Yeah, I have a fun one this week. I'm just I might be late to this party, but just in the past couple of weeks I've started using voice mode so much more with GPT, and I use it on my phone all the time. So I'm out, I'm walking, or we're in the car, and my husband and I are like, I wonder what that means, or how do we understand that? And I was like, we have a friend we can ask, and so we've now been using it for little things and bigger things. We were both trying to go back to cryptocurrency 101 because we feel like we're too old and we kind of miss the cryptocurrency like education, and we feel like we need to understand that now. So we did like cryptocurrency 101 on the way home the other night from the west side of the state. And we're walking back from just taking a walk, and he's annoyed that his Apple Watch keeps telling him he's near somebody else's AirPods and he doesn't know how to turn it off. I'm like, ChatGPT will help you. And I just ask her, and as she's telling him, you can do it. Voice mode is amazing because it's like having the information coming in through your ears while you're trying to do something with your hands it's like a superpower. So I then realized you can do it on your laptop as well. I mean, your computer as well. I had only been using voice mode on my phone. So now I've been using voice mode on my computer when I'm trying to have it teach me something. And I'm obsessed with like how I do my to-do lists and how I sort of keep track of things. And I'm a bullet journal enthusiast, and I will always have my bullet journal. But for some of my bigger projects, I feel like my notes are scattered throughout my bullet journals, and I'm on bullet journal 5 for the year, and there's like important notes back there. And so I needed to start keeping track of some of the things that I'm, thinking about over, where there's like lots of connecting thoughts over a long period of time. So I just have been asking voice mode on ChatGPT on my laptop to talk about the different tools and then to talk me through practicing with them. So for me, so it suggested a bunch of different ones, and then like I would pull them up, and I'm right now it's coaching me on Microsoft OneNote, which is probably the best probably the best tool for me just because it integrates with everything else in my suite. But it's amazing because again, it's information is coming in through my ears, like my tech support, and I'm like practicing, and I'll say no, it's not working, and describe what's not working. And all right, maybe that's not maybe I should have figured that out a long time ago, but it's been amazing. So yeah.
So just for people who maybe haven't even explored ChatGPT on their phone, what's the difference between using ChatGPT as they're hearing about it and using ChatGPT voice mode?
So I think you're asking like, ChatGPT voice mode is literally, instead of typing in a question or typing in a prompt, it's just speaking it. And that it's and the LLM just speaks back to you. It'll say, that's a great question. Here's what I think, here's what I think you're trying to figure out. Here are my, responses and ways to think about that. Was that helpful? Do you need more information? Can I help you think in more detail about any piece of that? It's like having a thought partner that you're talking to instead of, writing with. And for me, at least, it turns out to be a faster way of getting through something. And maybe, people who are faster typers or just think better through their fingers on their keyboards might not like it as much, but it's turned out to be like a great tool for me in working through things because I could be on different screens. I mean, my ChatGPT window, I don't even know where it is because I'm in my Microsoft OneNote window, and it's we're just talking. So
It's
kind of
very
cool.
much like if people have seen Her, the movie with Joaquin Phoenix, it's very much like his interaction with an AI, right?
Yes.
Talking
Yeah.
back and forth
Yeah.
very naturally.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
I
It's
think it's new, right? On the desktop version?
well, it must be because I think I would have noticed it before because I'm always like trying to see if there's like some new thing in there that I could play with. Maybe are you following the 12 days of shipness from
I'm not
OpenAI this
totally
week?
caught up.
No.
I know a little bit about it.
I'm not either, but every day for 12 days they're announcing a new product that's shipping live. So you can literally like log in at whatever time they're doing it and learn about the new product. Apparently yesterday they released the new Sora, which is their video model, and it basically crashed their entire system because so many people tried to get access to it. And so Sam Altman's been like updating everybody on social media, like we're working on it. I promise you, we had no idea we'd have this much interest, and we'll keep working on it. So maybe this was one of the products they shipped in 12 days of shipments, but I'm not sure. But it must be new because I think I would have noticed it before. I'm always in there looking for new things.
I'm pretty sure that recently, I mean, I get so I forget which ones have which features, but I'm pretty sure I logged into ChatGPT on my desktop recently, and there was a notice that sort of popped up that said now, like
Oh,
voice mode now available on desktop GPT.
I
So
see.
I've
I don't
also been using
yeah,
it. Yeah.
that's interesting. I don't think I saw the notice. I just saw that microphone thing appear like it does on my app on my phone, and I was like, "Oh, this will help," because yeah, interesting. How
It's
about you?
also
What was your moment? Yeah. Oh, sorry, go
well,
ahead.
like, no, like you, I really love interacting with voice mode. I feel like one of the things that is the most valuable thing professionally for me is having a really great thought partner just to talk things through with. And there is a difference to me cognitively in saying things out loud and thinking them through in a back and forth rather than typing them out. So I really love that. And it's funny, I know, he's controversial. People have many thoughts and feelings about him, but I remember years ago reading an interview with Elon Musk where in his very Elon way, he was talking about engaging with technology and he was saying that we would grow by leaps and bounds in our ability to use technology if we could get rid of our meat sticks as like interlocutor with the technology, meaning our fingers. Um, and I remember rolling my eyes when he said it, but he's right in the sense that when you eliminate that sort of friction of having to type things out, you can do a lot more quickly and feel more closely connected with the technology, I think.
Yeah, and especially well, like what I'm doing, you can be if you're using it to coach you through something, you can be doing the other thing and having this conversation with it. So it is I don't think that I don't think you can. I don't think there is voice mode on for the Claude or Gemini yet. I'm not sure if that's right, but I think that's right. So again, it's like another like head start that OpenAI has. That's kind of interesting.
Totally. And as you're saying that, I actually used it. I forgot that I used it for this purpose, but and I don't know what this says about me as a parent, but I was driving with my daughter and she was asking me about genetics, like what genes are. And we pulled up, I could not figure out how to actually describe this in a way that would make sense to an 8-year-old. And I pulled up voice mode because I was driving and said, could you explain genes and spelled it out for an 8-year-old? And it was so great. It was first of all, it spoke out loud as though it were speaking to an 8-year-old and sort of said, like, "It's great that you're curious about genetics and science." And then it said, essentially, the human body is made up of tiny little pieces, and every piece has a recipe in it. And that recipe tells the body how to combine different things for different results, as though you were baking cookies and, you put it and it was incredible. And I would have never come up with with that description for what genes are. So I also use voice mode all the time to explain things.
Yeah, the back and forth is really amazing. But I mean that your and then your daughter could ask it a follow up question. I mean, we were doing this in the car on the way home, same, and I have it like coming through my Bluetooth, and my husband's like interrupting it to ask follow up questions, and it's pretty good about like doesn't care that we have two different voices asking it questions. It's like we're in a three-way conversation, and yeah, it's
Definitely.
pretty interesting.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
and one I can't remember whether you've seen Murder at the End of the World yet. Have you watched this?
No, I know. You've told me to watch it, and I haven't gotten to it. Maybe this is a holiday watch for me. Yeah.
Yeah, so if people have seen it, there's an AI in the show, and it's a hologram, and everybody in the show really interacts with this AI through voice mode, but it has a sort of embodied version of the AI. And I always think that's probably pretty prescient of having somebody with a persona that will sort of embody this voice mode a little bit more.
I often when I'm presenting about this technology, I use this which credit to Zach Abramowitz, this quote of Ilya Sutskever's, who of course was the chief data scientist at OpenAI, and now it has his own company doing safety work around large language models. But he said the thing that surprises me the most about the models is that I feel heard when I'm working with them. And I feel like that's even more so with voice mode. You and I have talked about how that's even true when you're typing prompts and it responds in a way that feels like very, very much like a human, and it can be a little bit odd. It's even more so with voice mode, I find. I don't know if you agree. Yeah.
100% agree. It's much more like a human interaction. And especially I know they have I can't remember the word for it, but they have sort of built in a little bit of the verbal tics and ums and things that make it sound really human. and you can
Yeah.
interrupt it
Sure.
and like you would a
Yeah.
human. Yeah, it's very cool. I love using it that way. And my use this week was actually much less interesting. So I'm grateful to you for raising voice mode. I use it constantly, ChatGPT, as tech support when I cannot figure something out. So I have my own website and I was trying to figure out how to integrate this podcast and another podcast so that when we release them, they automatically populate on my page. And I just could not figure out how to do that on Wix. So I asked ChatGPT and it gave me the very simple directions for just copying and pasting the RSS feed right into it. I mean, these are the kinds of things that take a person who's a small business owner like hours of time to figure out that now I could do in 5 minutes. It's incredible.
That's really cool. Yeah, I mean, we've talked about this in other contexts as well. Like, it does feel like it's a superpower for small and medium businesses in general, but law firms too, right? Small and medium, law firms really have some upside growth potential, I think, with harnessing this technology, which is exciting.
Definitely. So great AI ahas this week. And if you're out there listening and haven't tried voice mode on ChatGPT, we strongly recommend it. It's a very cool experience. So moving into our definitions, one of the sort of cool things about learning about AI is all the jargon that comes along with it. So, Bridget, do you want to describe what our definition for today is, which is synthetic data?
Um, Absolutely. So synthetic data is a term I would say I started hearing in the context of generative AI. I don't know, a year ago was what when you first started hearing about whether the frontier model companies were going to run out of data to train their AI models on. That was that was a relevant discussion because it used to be that was how you scaled your model, right? That's how they got better, was you trained it on more data. And there was this concern that they were going to run out of data. Like, if they've already ingested the entire internet and every, book they can get their hands on, and I guess in Google's case, every YouTube video, you name it, then there's like nothing more to ingest, and they're going to hit a wall and not be able to scale anymore. And so I started hearing about synthetic data. Excuse me, can I buy a vowel? Which is it's what it sounds like. It's data that's generated by the AI models themselves that mimics real world data. So, which makes sense, right? I mean, like we were just talking about these like long conversations we're both having with this technology. Then all of a sudden, there's like lots more data that it can train itself on to continue learning. And I think I don't actually. Maybe you do know. I don't feel like I have a sense of how much the frontier model companies are using synthetic data at this point to like scale their models. But it certainly is, or could be at least, a useful tool for thinking about responsible AI integration. Do you have a sense of whether like it's just something that they're all using now? I don't know that.
I don't know about the actual use. Most of the conversations I hear are about their sort of forward-looking approach to starting to use synthetic data and making sure that it's data that can actually help advance the models and not sort of inferior to actual data, which to me was I started hearing about it in the same way that you did when they were starting to run out, and I remember most of the commentary being sort of like that movie with Michael Keaton where they keep making copies of him and every copy of Michael Keaton gets worse and worse. And the concern was that it was gonna be really garbage in, garbage out. But the more I see now, about the use of synthetic data, the more I see commentary about how helpful it can be, um, you know, to the extent that we're going to actually try to be responsible about people's creative works or privileged and sensitive information, that we can produce synthetic data using the AI that is actually strong enough to train it, but avoids using people's sensitive information, which I think for lawyers would be a huge leap forward, and an ability to really sort of engage and build models that have legal applications without those concerns.
Yeah, that's right.
Very cool. Well, that brings us to our main topic for today. And I thought synthetic data was an interesting definition because it thinks about the proliferation of all sorts of new information and new content in our systems. And today we want to talk about what happens when any of us can produce new content for any different purpose at the click of a button, or even maybe not at the click of the button, maybe just using our own voices, and how that manifests in spaces like regulatory agencies that use a lot of public commentary to decide how to shape policy. And so we're going to talk about two different pieces today. The first is an HBR article from Sean West and Stephen Heitkamp called Gen AI Makes Legal Action Cheap and Companies Need to Prepare. And then we'll compare it with a recent blog post by an appellate litigator you brought to our attention, Bridget, Adam Unikowski, who talks about this in the context of the National Environmental Policy Act. So let's start with the HBR article, and maybe you could summarize it for us, Bridget.
Yeah, absolutely. And we talked about this article when it came out, which was maybe a couple of months ago at this point. I feel like, and I can't tell you how many people, probably you too, sent it to me at that time. It's an interesting, I think, window onto this issue of will reducing the barrier to entry to legal process be good or bad, right? This is like one flavor of it, and we'll reserve for future conversations what it means in other contexts, like personal injury law and other ways in which reducing the barrier to entry could be a really good thing or maybe a really bad thing. But interesting conversations I think around. But this one's fascinating, and I'm going to take a step back before I describe what the HBR piece focused on, the specific case, to do like ad law 101, which is really dangerous because never even took ad law. But
Really?
no, never took ad law. Went through law school, never took ad law.
That was my favorite class in law school. It's ad law.
Really?
Yes, I
Oh.
loved administrative law. I don't know why, but just really spoke.
Well, I mean, honestly, I feel like it should be a required class because it's such an important source of law in our society. And if you don't understand sort of how administrative agencies, both the federal and the state level, function and what an important source of law their work is, I think it's hard to understand the operating system of our society generally. They're just it's I mean, some people call it on both, either if you love it or you hate it, like the fourth branch of government, right? The administrative state. But agencies are where a lot of really specific regulatory work is done by experts, right? Experts in whatever the agency's mission is. But one of the ways in which one of the requirements for new regulations from any agency is that they have to, if they have a new rule, they have to publish it in the Federal Register, and they have to publish the text and also their justification for the rule, so the public can see, what the specific proposed rule is, why the agency thinks it's important, and then there's this public comment period, which it's literally an open public comment period, usually 30 to 60 days, and the people can, people can write in. Often it's obviously experts. I don't know how many uh, regular people are like checking the Federal Register every day for new rules that they want to comment on. But if you're in an industry that is affected by the rule, you submit a comment either in support or opposition or making suggestions for comments, for changes and consequences downstream that the agency might not have thought of. Potential legal concerns. There are entire legal practices around this process, right? There are lawyers who do this and only this, and then the agency is supposed to review all those comments, synthesize them. If there's a substantial factual or legal concern, the agency has to address it in its final rulemaking process, and then that process can be the subject of litigation and often is the subject of litigation after the fact. Okay, that was a little bit boring. So let me get back to this HBR story and example. So Treasury, the U.S. Treasury Department, was proposing a cryptocurrency disclosure rule. I don't now remember exactly what the specifics were of the disclosure that it proposed requiring, but there was resistance from the crypto industry and a group that called itself Lex Punk Army, which was a sort of legal and tech group, used an AI bot and enabled really quick and widespread public commentary about this rulemaking. And they generated 120,000 comments, which is significantly more than you normally see in a proposed regulation like this. And it meant that the rule was able to be, delayed significantly because the agency had to work through all 120,000 comments and be able to like respond and synthesize them and then take them into account in its final rulemaking process. And so, it was this first like practical example of what we've heard, or I've heard, and I think you have as well, like lots of lawyers from the very beginning worry about as one of the doomsday scenarios about this technology and its potential legal use cases. If you can all of a sudden file 120,000 comments and frankly, it worked, delay the rulemaking and change the outcome just because you now have a technology that can make that happen and you wouldn't have been able to happen before the technology. That's the question I feel like I've heard from the beginning. Like, is that good or is that bad, right? Do we want that outcome? Whether we want it or not, this is a perfect example that it's here. That this now is possible, and so the HVR piece really was focused on what you probably should be doing and thinking about. What are your strategies if you are a business that has to think about this regulatory these kinds of challenges. I actually think the authors are thinking beyond regulatory, but it's the what does it look like to prepare yourself for this new set of risks that hasn't been on our radar as for businesses or law firms until now, and that was, I think, a pretty interesting part of the piece. I'll pause for a minute to make sure. Do you think was there anything else that I should have covered before we discuss some of the recommendations?
No, I think that was great. And just to put a fine point on the one comment you made about the crypto industry, I think in the article, the authors say, this could just be evidence of an industry that happens to be really facile with technology, using its skills to inundate the system, or it could be a harbinger of what's to come in other regulatory landscapes. And the authors say they think it is the latter rather than the former, but because it's sort of an early case of people who do use technology well, that gives us like a little bit of time to think about what happens when this occurs across all different regulatory landscapes that we might not anticipate.
Yeah. The authors are really thoughtful in sort of placing this particular specific risk in kind of the larger geopolitical and economic disruption that's part of the world businesses are operating in today, and they write about that a lot. The more general geopolitical risks, and they make some suggestions, or like at least they say you should take it seriously, right? Like don't write it off as okay, the crypto people figured out how to do it. So, but that's that's not going to happen in my business because we're not whatever. But their point was you have to take this seriously as you think about how to prepare for this kind of risk, because it's absolutely possible in any industry. So I don't know. Do you have a thought on what if you're advising a business or a law firm and now you're advising them to put this on their risk register, right? We now have to like have on our risk register the possibility that we could have all of a sudden, 120,000 lawsuits filed against us tomorrow. What are the strategies for businesses or law firms? I mean, law firms are businesses, but what are the strategies that you would advise them to think about in preparing for this kind of risk?
Well, what the authors did something that I know you and I have taught in classes that we teach together, and I love that they did this, which is being inspired by other industries with analogous situations. So they draw from the cybersecurity landscape and they compare it to, I think, distributed demand, a DDoS attack, and
Yeah.
the way that cyber security experts deal with that, as I understand it, learning from the article, is pooling and aggregating information across companies so that companies can share in a centralized database. And they list a few in the article that are well known, so that if you're operating at company ABC across the world and I'm at a different company, I can benefit from your experience and be more prepared. And collectively, we can come up with a counter offensive, I guess, to something like this. And they talk in the article about how uncomfortable something like that would make lawyers because we keep everything very, very confidential. Handle privileged and sensitive information. But I think the point that they are making, that you and I have talked about in different contexts, is that we're entering a totally new era of risk in the way that we think about it as lawyers. And our discomfort comes from trying to apply the frameworks that we used in the prior era to this new era. But we're actually doing ourselves a disservice if we don't try to reshape the way that we think about sharing information, for example, to protect our clients from risk. So I think in the long term, their counsel would be for the whole profession to sort of rethink the way that we consider information. Would you agree with that and share
Yeah.
information with one another?
Yeah, or at least, think about the ways in which you can share your info. You can anonymize and share your information, which also has gotten a little bit easier with, this technology that can take unstructured data and, clean it in any way you want. Yeah, it feels like, another collective action problem to me, though. Like, I think that their suggestion that we learn from cyber is a really good one. But we've talked about this in other contexts. I think, for lots of cultural and understandable reasons, there are significant silos within the legal profession. And I don't know who takes the lead on this kind of response management project, right? Like, who's going to say, hey, we all are running these legal businesses that now have this new significant risk, and the best way to guard against it is for us to think about a strategy that breaks down our silos. That I don't know who does that. I feel a little bit worried about, like, where we find the leader for that change management process within the profession. I don't know if maybe you found them in your in all of your consulting. I don't know.
No, I totally agree. I mean, it reminds me of the conversation around outside council guidelines and coming up with uniform anonymized sets that you can use to sort of accelerate Gen AI adoption with your outside counsel, right? Coming up with structures that create different incentives for collective action. I don't know of anybody who's thinking that far ahead, though the article does talk about, I think they reference DLA Piper as a firm that is currently working with its clients to do red teaming, which is a term that we talked about before on the podcast, to sort of simulate what kinds of mass produced claims or regulatory filings might be submitted in the realms that affect their clients. And to me, that feels like an innovation that would be comfortable for law firms and also potentially provide a new service offering to clients that are trying to manage all of this risk.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like, I mean, I don't know. You'll know better than I do. I don't know how often law firms are doing tabletop exercises around, enterprise risk management. Businesses do it all the time, right? I mean, we actually do. We do tabletop exercises a lot. And it turns out it can be quite helpful, right, when you do have an emergency. But I don't know how many law firms are doing that besides DLA. It was interesting that DLA is doing it, but
Yeah, I have not heard of many doing it, although maybe they're out there and I'm just not aware of them. But it is a great way to sort of scenario plan and future cast, what could happen under different sets of circumstances. It also seems like because of the things that the authors point out, all of the geopolitical chaos and changing regulatory structures and frameworks, all of the law firms that are listening to this are serving corporate clients that are dealing with this complexity. And
Yeah.
just like generative AI strategy generally need help and need support in thinking this through. They don't have the time to now try to figure out what this Lex Punk army means for, their risk
Yeah.
assessment. So it strikes
Yeah.
me as a very forward-looking approach that DLA Piper has, and I think there are lots of opportunities like that now emerging for firms.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's like, yeah, again, I would actually think about how to use the technology to think about this new segment of ERM that you're going to have to think about, right? I would great startup idea. Those of you who are out there looking for a startup idea, something that businesses and law firms are going to need. I think it's pretty interesting.
Yeah. And in the meantime, I would say, a couple of thoughts around what corporate departments can do or what law firms can do until there's some sort of massive shift in the way that we think about it is education, first and foremost. I think most people are probably not even thinking about this as an outcome of generative AI. They're thinking a lot about Gen AI, but not in this respect. I think also, as we sort of just suggested, workshops and tabletop exercises with your clients to walk through what the risks could look like and how you might respond together. And then I think having, some sort of protocol for what happens when there's an incident like this so that you're not then you might need to wait until something happens to actually have something live to respond to, but you want to have a plan in place in advance of what that response might look like. And all of that would require collaborating with people who have different types of expertise, cybersecurity expertise, data science backgrounds, ethicists, that kind of thing. And then I would just say, to your point about collective action, find industry opportunities where people are coming together to share how they're responding to this risk, would be the steps that I would take, and have a communications plan ready to go for if this were to happen in your realm.
Yeah, it's yet another example of where lawyers are going to have to get comfortable with the fact that we need to collaborate with people with other expertise. Like we're not going to solve this one on our own. We need partners outside of our expertise to really manage it, I think, well.
I think that's right.
We're going to talk about one other sort of the other side of the coin, from Adam Unikowski's Substack this week. He wrote about this DC Circuit case, which is Marin Audubon Society versus the FAA. And he wrote a pretty interesting piece about environmental impact statements and how generative AI might be useful on the agency side of rulemaking. And so, you want to summarize a little bit about Adam's piece, and the takeaways?
Sure, I'll do my best to try to summarize what was a really great piece about an act that I wasn't familiar with, the National Environmental Policy Act, which, as I gather from Adam's piece, is an act that requires that agencies prepare environmental impact statements, or EISs, in advance of any sort of federal development project. And the goal of the EIS is not necessarily, as it's structured under this act, for these agencies to create a record that judges would review for substance to determine whether the project should actually happen at all. The goal really is to educate the public so that the public can engage with the agencies and do what we were talking about in the last segment, which is try to work with the agencies to shape what the public thinks should happen around these projects. So it's an entirely procedural versus a substantive framework, but judges end up getting involved in the litigation that follows, sometimes the creation of these EIS reports, when plaintiffs who are unhappy with a proposed federal project sue. And Adam's point really is that even though the lawsuits are about ostensibly the EIS statements themselves, the real desired outcome on the part of the plaintiffs is to slow down or stop the project altogether, right? And the creation of these EISs can take years, which can stifle development of projects that maybe we want to happen. And the actual EISs themselves are done. He lays out the one in the DC Circuit case and pulls a few samples. They're done by experts. They're very thorough. In that case, I think it was 3,600 pages of detailed information about the impact of this proposed project. And Adam talks about how AI could enable us to accelerate two pieces of this work. And he has some interesting ideas about how we could reshape the way that the NEPA framework currently operates and the friction it creates by having the AI actually assist in producing the EIS in the first place, so it doesn't take years and years to produce. Also, he sort of has three different pieces of this, I think. That piece, producing the EIS, making the EIS dynamic so that even the most interested person in the public is not going to be able to read 3,600 pages about a project. But if we use a chat GPT-like interface, we can upload the EIS and ask questions of it so that we can focus on learning what is really important to us as a member of the public. So having a more dynamic interface involved. And then I think his boldest suggestion, and you can correct me, Bridget, if I'm misstating any part of his argument and discussion here, is removing the judicial review piece of this altogether, because the judges are not reviewing these EISs for their content to determine whether the content was properly designed. They're really reviewing the procedure through which the EISs were produced and whether it's sufficient. And Adam argues that in that case, in that specific use case, AI could do that work without engaging judges. But I'm going to stop because it was a really complex piece, and I want to see what I've misstated about Adam.
Yeah, no, well, first of all, I encourage everybody to read Adam's piece because he's such a great writer. And you were saying this earlier, Jen. He writes about complicated legal concepts in a way that's really clear and simple, and you don't have to be an expert either in rulemaking or the substantive case to understand what the arguments he's making. So I really encourage you to read it. But yeah, I think you got it. I mean, I didn't know anything about this process myself either. I've never been an environmental litigator, but apparently the time to complete an environmental impact statement can be 4.5 years. Excuse me. Or many taking over 6 years. And no project can proceed until it's complete. And so, you could imagine having a position where 6-year delay is actually what you want. But the truth is that there's pretty good evidence that clean energy products actually have a harder time making it through this process than oil and gas because they have exemptions. So it isn't clear that the point of the process is actually serving the interest it was intended to serve. But Adam says there's really good reasons to do it if we can figure out how not to weaponize it, right? So this technology might really be the way to figure out how not to weaponize it. If the technology can produce a very thorough environmental impact statement in a short timeline, and then produce it in a way that people who really do know something about the particular project, the particular area, the effects it would have on, in this case, the mating places for, what's the plural of grouse? Grouses?
Oh,
Grousei? Grousey? I don't know.
I don't know.
Grouse.
Grouse sounds good.
The grouse. But, the people who actually have information about that, if they could interact with it and really get that information to the agency, and then the agency could take it into account and make a change that kind of was win-win for everybody, that feels like a pretty good outcome. And isn't that why we have the rulemaking process? It's so that we can get important information to an agency so that the experts in this area can make a better decision about what to do with it. If the process has just become one that just is a way to delay, and nobody actually can read 3,600 pages and interact with it in a way to make the process better, then what are we doing, right? And so the fact that the technology could actually help serve the purpose of the process, or at least its intended purpose, feels kind of exciting. I know that the part that people I think will be the most worried about is having the technology actually do the procedural review. But again, because it's not substantive, it's not like you need the technology to say, yes, in fact, this is going to have bad outcomes on the
I'm gonna say
grousey,
Grace. I'm gonna go with Grace.
grace. Yeah, on the grace. Uh, yeah, I mean, you know, if that were the question, then I think you need humans, and not that judges are experts in grace, or Grace's mating habits, but they can review the work of the experts and make sure, make sure that there isn't a legal problem with the project proceeding. But if it's really just if the only question is, has the agency done procedurally what it's required to do, so that the public can interact and move on to the substantive part of the process. Um, the AI can probably do that as well as any human, and maybe even better. Like, that's the kind of project that you could build, I think, today with this technology at home. With like a custom GPT. Like, it's because, again, it's like a niche data set, right? You could teach it. These are the elements that an EIS has to have. You could train it on, perfected EISs. I don't know even if my plurals are really a hot mess today. I apologize for all my plurals. But you could imagine like building a tool that could do that very, very effectively, and again, save judges time for the kind of work that um, judges really need to do, right? That we're not going to want to defer to technology. And I'm not saying you wouldn't, I think there are like steps along the way in this process. You could imagine building a generative AI tool that could take the first cut, right? And say, we've reviewed it against our EIS GPT, and we see, these three problems, and then the agency could fix those three problems, right? Could just help the agency like do what it needs to do. We think it's met all of the things on the checklist, and then you could imagine going to a judge to either confirm or send it back for additional procedural work. It just feels to me like it's the kind of thing that could do some of the work that probably isn't the best use of our judges' time, and to save the judges for the stuff that we really need humans doing, where judgment is really important. So I think it's a very cool idea, and I am really interested in the possibilities for governments and courts. As you know, we've talked about this a million times. You too, I know how they can get the most of this technology, and I worry a little bit, always do, that they could get left behind if the resources aren't there to help them figure out how to use it to protect the public, which is what they do.
Yeah. Yeah, and it makes me think back to, I think last year Ezra Klein wrote a piece for the Times about infrastructure and how long it takes in the US to build any federal project. And I think he makes the argument that lawyers really are the problem, that we put up so many different governance structures that they all overlap, and the result is some of the things that Adam's talking about. And to me, I was excited when you shared this with me because I don't think you want to be less deliberative. I think there are really good reasons to have structures in place, but I would hope that lawyers would start thinking about at the outset of the creation of an administrative framework, how might we leverage AI in a way that actually enables, to your point, enables what we're trying to achieve here and doesn't end up creating this complexity that people can use either intentionally or unintentionally to delay things forever. And then we could
Yeah.
elevate sort of the esteem of the profession in terms of accelerating development and contributing to the production of new projects.
Yeah, I don't know. I think there's a lot of exciting upside potential. Again, startup founders out there. Government, LLM tech. Excited about it.
So, based on that one example from the NEPA example, um, how can we think about a framework that can guide us to find other places in the law or the administrative um, agency realm where we could think about these solutions? What do you think are the hallmarks?
Yeah, I think this is one of the and Adam does a nice job thinking about this, but I feel like there's so much more thinking we can do around this. The reason why this might be an easy use case if you're building a continuum is there's no due process rights at stake, right? There's no individual liberty that's called into question in a simply just a procedural step of a regulatory process. um I'm always thinking about this in all the different kinds of disputes that we have, and where along the way could you build in. um I'm thinking of them as like modules, or my talented CTO Diana always calls them lily pads. Like, what are the lily pads along the way where you can have the technology assist the human decision maker, to save the human decision maker for the important stuff that only the human can do. So you could imagine, steps along the way of any process where some of it is just procedural, right? Like if you need to understand a timeline of a particular dispute or a timeline of a regulatory process so that people can engage with it and agree or disagree. Having a human judge or her clerk put that together isn't the best use of talented lawyers' time. And you could imagine having a lily pad where the technology did that and said to the parties, like, "Do you agree with this?" I'm thinking now in the ADR process. I think for courts to have that much interaction in the middle of the case is harder, it- given their limits. But you could imagine sending the parties the tech um, produced timeline of events and saying this is the timeline that seems to reflect this project or this dispute. Tell me what's wrong with it, right? And then the human could review that incoming from parties and edit it and update it and get to a place where everybody agreed. I think the possibility that we can take parts of a dispute resolution process and get agreement along the way will really help us with better dispute resolution at the end, right? If we all agree, along the way that these are yep, this is the timeline, these are the different legal arguments we're making, these are the responses. We all agree about the universe of things in this dispute. Then we're all going to come out of that process with, I think we're all going to come out feeling like we were heard, we were understood, even if we didn't prevail.
Mhm.
All the literature on procedural fairness, I think, is really important right now. You can build in so much more procedural fairness when you use these tools along the way. Another reason why I'm excited about some of those lily pads along the way. I don't know. Do you have other thoughts on that
I
topic?
I
Ways we
don't
can
think
think
I
about the
can
framework?
I don't think I can add anything to what you just described. I mean, I share your excitement. I always am looking for ways that the profession can really elevate the problem solving for the parties. If you're in a
What?
dispute context or if you're in a regulatory context, like helping the public actually engage with agencies in a way that shape policy for the public, and finding these cool opportunities to leverage technology to elevate the people that matter in all of this is exciting to me. And you just offered the perfect segue to a future episode that we're going to have around disputes themselves and how we can be leveraging Gen AI and how a few really cool startups are doing that on the plaintiff side, the defense side. And then we can also talk about how it unfolds in ADR. There are just really, really interesting and exciting opportunities on the horizon. So I loved this conversation. It did show both sides of the coin, right? Technology can be used for ill or for good. And we're excited to have conversations about how to use it for good.
Definitely. This was fun.
Great. Well, thank you everybody for listening to this episode of 2030 Vision, AI and the Future of Law. We will see you on a future episode. And until then, be well. Thanks, Bridget.
Thank you.
Thank you for tuning in to 2030 Vision, AI and the Future of Law. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe to our podcast and leave a review. Stay informed and inspired as we continue to explore the AI-driven future of the legal profession. We'll see you next time.